Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About It. This is Susan Johnson, and my co host is out campaigning because he's running for office for the Willimantic Taxing District. So, Dennis O'Brien will be back after the elections. But for now, we have a wonderful guest for you today, somebody who's doing wonderful work all over the state of Connecticut. State Senator Matt Lesser, who he and I went into the Capitol together back when Obama first got elected, and we were sworn in 2009. So thank you so much, Senator Lesser, for helping us out and being on the show today.
Oh, it's great to be back on the show, Susan. It's great to be with you.
Yes, thank you so much. And so I just I think that the listeners should know that you and Senator Flexer and I all came in 2009 when we had a pretty good size representation in the House Democrats back in that day.
Yes, that was a long time ago, but yes, we had a big class. We rode in the Obama wave together, and there are a few of us still left.
Yes, there are, but not as many. And so it's me, Majority Leader Rojas, and State Rep and Deputy Speaker Michelle Cook, who are in the House. We're the only ones left from that group.
We also have Senator Pat Billy Miller, Senator Winfield in the Senate as well. So there are a few of us, but not too many.
Yeah. So in the House and the Senate, I mean, there's just a few left, and I think that one of the things that helps us is the knowledge that we brought with us, but also the work that we've done over the last few years.
Yeah.
So having said that, I know that when you were in the House, you did a lot of good things, and you're still doing a lot of good things now. You're the Senate Chair of the Human Services Committee, and we'll get to some of that work in a minute. But let's go back to when you were in the House and you put together that great bill to take care of the student loans.
Yeah, well, I looked at the time. I was the chair of the banking committee in the House, and we had a financial product that was out there, student loans that were bigger than credit card debt, and yet it was completely unregulated by the state of Connecticut, or really by anybody. And so I wrote a law called the Student Loan Bill of Rights that regulates the student loan industry, just like any other financial product, to make sure that there are basic consumer protections in effect, that these guys have to answer questions about how payments are made and other questions that borrowers may have, and then also provides assistance to student loan borrowers. And that second part, the law we passed way back in 2015, but we were really successful at regulating the student loan industry, and in fact, it became a national model. What we were less successful at was providing that assistance focus on borrowers, and so I'm actually very happy that this year in the state budget we were able to finally step up and create an office to assist borrowers and really focus on, people are seeing their payments resume after the pandemic. They were paused for a couple of years, and people are really hurting. And so the question is, how do you avoid getting absolutely hammered? What are your options? What can you do to make sure that you're saving money? And where do you go to resolve disputes with servicers? And so it's been a big success. I'm really hoping that new office, the Student Loan Ombudsman, provides that extra assistance that I know so many people out there need right now.
Oh, well, thank you so much for all your work on that, and I just think that is it's a great step forward. We did do a good job this year. I know that there were a lot of people on the other side of the aisle who were trying to stop that work, and some of the rhetoric that I hear about the student loan situation is really not really tuned into the circumstances that we've placed students in over the last several years when we finally, when Reagan was president, and stopped them from being able to declare the student loan debt and discharged in bankruptcy. So now we have the only group of people in the whole country that haven't got bankruptcy available to them, and it's created a horrible problem. The interest rates are crazy, and if they're federal loans, they're crazy interest rates under the federal student loan programs. And I just talked to a student who just finished paying her debt off. She had incurred a $30,000 debt for loans, but ended up having to pay $90,000 because of the interest rates. And
Right.
she was a very young person, and so I know that she didn't have that debt that long, but still, despite that, the debt was just enormous. Two, three times what you would normally expect. It's more than a mortgage in a house in terms of the interest rates in some circumstances.
Yeah. And the Higher Education Act, which was what originally set up the federal student loan program, it was a civil rights bill. The idea was if we, finance college for folks, it will help people get into the middle class. It will help reduce inequities in our country and provide opportunity for everyone. But as a part of a compromise, rather than provide grants to folks, it was really focused on loans. And it's for too many folks, they're caught in a debt cycle, and it has really prevented folks from getting into the middle class. In fact, for some groups, college is no longer, this is heartbreaking, college is no longer a pathway to the middle class because the cost of debt exceeds the increased benefit of education, and that's really heartbreaking. So I think obviously not everyone needs to go to college, but for those who would like to, they should be able to go without going inescapably into debt. That seems to only make sense, and Connecticut has a particular role to play, and part of it is regulating student loans. Part of it is pushing our federal delegation to do more to support student borrowers. But obviously we also have our part to do in terms of funding higher education, our community college system, and our state colleges and universities.
And I was very, very pleased with our work that we've done with the community college funding, because now we have free community college for our students all throughout the state of Connecticut, and that'll give everybody a leg up in terms of being able to get that associate's degree or that certification that they need to be able to go on and get a job that will help pay the rent and take care of them as they move through their years as workers in our economy. But also it will increase the number of students, I believe, and I've talked to some university professors about this, it will increase the numbers of students that go from not getting through anything but to their sophomore year, but they'll be able to finish all 4 years because of the free community college and early college opportunities that we have in some of our high schools.
Yeah, no, it's great. So it's a great program, and we gotta expand it even further.
Yes, I would like to see more. And of course, there was the National Pell Grant that used to pay the whole amount, and then that was cut back under the Reagan administration as well.
Well, I'm not voting for that guy anymore.
And neither am I. I just have to review sometimes what he actually did to students and to where we are today. So that's kind of like where I like to show, but we haven't been able to change it either. So over the last several years. But anyway, moving on. So then you ran for the Senate and you left the House. And I'm
sorry about that.
Yeah, we missed you. We really did. But we were glad to have your power in the Senate and your work there. And so since then, you've done a lot of good work. And I just wanted to just check in with you on the work that we've done, as you have been the Senate Chair this time of the Human Services Committee. So I want to thank you for stepping up to do that and the work that you've done there.
Thank you, Susan. I've the Human Services Committee oversees the Department of Social Services and the Department of Aging and Disability Services. We're really focused on rebuilding the social safety net here in Connecticut, and we've been able to do it in a lot of different ways, including supporting the state's Medicaid program. But I really want to highlight some of the work that you did this session, and we did together in helping rebuild TANF. And you want to talk a little bit about what we did there? I know that was
I'm thrilled, absolutely
a long
thrilled.
time coming.
This has been something that I actually tried to do when I first got to the Capitol, was to work on TANF, temporary assistance for needy families, because as I followed through back in the day, we used to have a program called Aid to Families with Dependent Children, which mothers that had children fell into hard times economically would be able to actually stay on the assistance program until their children were ready to go to first grade, till they were 6 years old. So once the kids were in school, at that point in time, the moms would start getting some kind of training, begin working, and finally move their way off. They had a gradual program that allowed subsidies for work and for the child care, and all those programs and all those things. That safety net was pretty strong. And over the years, starting again with Reagan, but moving fast through the Reagan years and into the Clinton years, when the Aid to Families with Dependent Children was completely eliminated, and created the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program in the 90s. And what happened at that point in time is Governor Rowland made, because it's a block grant, they could do whatever they wanted. Before, it was an entitlement program. It was changed from an entitlement program where you were entitled to whatever the contract between the state and the federal government was, to a block grant, which was just allocated a money that could be used in any way that the state saw fit. So what happened is Governor Rowland made it into a 21-month lifetime rule back in the 90s, and it created a situation in our state where we had the second worst temporary assistance for needy families program in the entire country, and we were only funding it at 44% of poverty, giving women and children about $2 million to $5 million over the years a year, when the federal government was giving the state of Connecticut for that program $260 million. So I was very, very pleased to be able to work with you, Senator Lesser, and Representative Gilchrist to actually make our temporary assistance for needy families more functional. So now we have a program that is 36 months and has the benefit cliff goes on. It's not like it was, where you just get shut down after you get to 44% of poverty. And we also have a situation where people are able to continue on past the 44%. We've gone to 55% of poverty, and we're going to be going up to the federal poverty line at some point. And this is all going into effect in April 2024. So these kinds of changes will help us with our homeless families, because back in the day, before we had this change under the Rowland administration, I never saw a huge number of homeless families and shelters being filled up. But once TANF became the 21-month rule, where Connecticut had the second worst program in the whole country, we are now, I think, going to see a change in that. And the little children won't be traumatized anymore from being pulled out of their homes, put into shelters, and moved around from place to place. Their performance in school isn't as good when they're in that dysfunctional kind of trauma homeless situation. So that is, I'm very thrilled that we've stepped up and that we're doing more for the women and children. The little ones really need that security in their homes.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think that Bill Clinton did a lot of good things, but when he worked with Republicans in Congress in 1996, on the so-called welfare reforms, he really did a lot of damage to families all across the country. And that's not only did Connecticut go along with it, as you point out, we had the second least generous program in the country. And so effectively we had no safety net for families that, found themselves in financial difficulty. And your point is really well taken. Sometimes, even a very small hiccup, somebody having a broken car and not being able to get to work can result in a cascade of events that could wind them up in homelessness. And just a small amount of support, even a temporary support, can really make a world of a difference for families with young children. And That's why this program is so critically important, because people can have major issues and they can land on their feet and be tided over until better times. But without that safety net, you're really on your own, and it causes real trauma for families around the state. So I don't understand why we were so, generally Connecticut's among the more generous states. For us to be 49th in the country was really appalling. And so I'm so glad that you pointed that out to me, and we were able to get that legislation passed this year. And I know it's something you've been advocating for a long time, and I'm just glad we were able to finally get it done.
Well, I can't thank you and Representative Gilchrist enough for the work that you did to coordinate. We have wonderful commissioners. We worked with the Department of Children and Families Commissioner, for example, who said that, gee, you're going to save our Department of Children and Families a lot of work and money if we actually are able to make sure that women and children can stay in their homes and not end up in homeless shelters. That was one aspect of this change. So DCF was on board.
And Commissioner Barton Reeves at Department of Social Services was great too. She was really helpful in getting it through, and so the two of them, I think, were really instrumental.
Yes, I agree with you. I was going to go on to her next, but I just wanted to just check in on and then also we had the Commissioner of Early Childhood, and she was very, very supportive. And also
another former House member.
Yes, indeed, yes. And then the Commissioner of Educational, our Education Commissioner was also very supportive. So we had a really good team. We had the Human Services Committee, and then we had these 4 executive branch people who were really understanding of the fact that this TANF program needs to be there for the children, and it needs to be there to help the families move forward so they can participate in the economy, because there was no way to get a step up in the economy without getting a little support from the state, and it's a huge benefit to the state to have all these people working in areas where they can afford to pay their rent.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, I was very, very pleased with the TANF program. And moving on to also the fact that we have a wonderful Social Services, Human Services Commissioner, is a lot of the Medicaid programs that we're working on and will continue to work on. But Medicaid is an area that we really need to continue to work on because it's very complicated. And I know that we've struggled with that area, and we will still be working on making sure. But one aspect of Medicaid that has been good and that we continue to do really, really well, it's called Medicare Savings, but it's supplemented by Medicaid. And the Medicare Savings Program is something that, I like to make sure people know that it's a supplemental policy for people who are eligible for this kind of the income eligibility, and you don't have to purchase a supplement for your Medicare if you're disabled or if you're 65 and over, because you can get the Medicare Savings Program to pay for all your deductibles and co-insurance payments.
For folks who are Medicare eligible, if you're over 65 or depends on your age, but right now it's open enrollment for Medicare, and this is a good time to take advantage of the Choices program, where you can, and if you call 1-800-994-9422, that's 994-9422, you can speak with a counselor in your area who can help you navigate different Medicare programs, including the Medicare Savings Program, which can help pay your premiums. So this is a really good time to figure out which specific programs are best for you.
That's an excellent point. And this enrollment period goes on until early December, so make sure if you want to change what you're doing, or you're just enrolling now, this is the time to do it, and you have until very early in December. I'm not going to give the exact date because it changes from year to year. So that is a very, very important thing to know. And one of the things also I think that we've been very, very focused on is the fact that we want to make sure that our small businesses access the Connecticut Access CT for supplemental policies not supplemental for policies, health insurance policies, small group plans. Because if they do access that through the Connecticut CT Access program, what they'll be able to do is if they have a low-income population that they have employed with them, they'll be able to get a supplement from Connecticut Access if they get the right kind of policy.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've been working on for a number of years is trying to figure out how to make sure that small businesses can get access to affordable health insurance coverage and avoid junk plans, because a lot of folks, you know, if you're running a small business, that's hard enough to also then have to figure out how to navigate the health insurance market is a lot tougher. What we've been seeing over the last few years is a bunch of small businesses going to where brokers are steering them, which are to these what are called level funded plans, and those are potentially really bad news. These are they promise level funding, but what it really does is it puts an awful lot of risk on the employer. These are self-insured products, so you know, it's one thing for a large employer to be self-insured, but it's another thing for a small employer to take on that level of risk. And it also puts a lot of costs onto employees. And so frequently these are junk plans and don't have the same level of benefits that folks, you know, might be used to. So, you know, looking for alternatives is really important. I know Access Health CT through their SHOP program has some plans, and I think we need to work together, you know, bipartisanly in the legislature to pass legislation to make sure that more options are available out there, because it's a real challenge for small employers, I know.
It is, and it's also something that people will go and work in a place where they have a chance for a health insurance plan. But if you have a junk plan, in my mind, what that means is that, well, oh, by the way, you've got a very low premium, but you've got a huge deductible, and it can't be regulated by the state, because the junk plans, those types of plans are regulated on the federal level, and so there's no access to being able to do state regulation in the junk plans. And so what they do is they have these high deductibles. So if you have a very high deductible, a lot of them are like $6,000 in a year. You'd have to spend that down in a year. So people never really get to use their insurance plan because the deductibles are so high. And the way they get people to sign into some of these things is by selling them on the idea that it's a very low premium, but then the deductible is so high that the insurance industry really makes out. They collect the premiums and never have to pay any of the costs of the health care.
It's a good business, I guess, but no, it's a real problem, and it puts small businesses at a competitive disadvantage, because if you're a family and you want to make sure your kids, when they get sick, can go see a doctor, you're really going to have a strong incentive to go to work at a major employer, a large employer, and that hurts entrepreneurship. It hurts the economy as a whole, because people should be able to go work where they want to work, and they shouldn't be tied to an employer just because just simply through scale they're able to offer decent health insurance.
Exactly, and so that's going to be a constant piece of work that all of us are going to have to focus on, because I think that a lot of the insurance industry work is pretty complicated, just like the Medicaid is complicated, and so is Medicare. And these are things that sometimes, if you can't study them or have some experience with them, or like you say, go to Connecticut Choices for the Medicare supplements, then we're in a situation where people are going to end up paying money and not getting the benefit of the money that they've been paying into some of these plans. So it's really important that we continue to work on this and make sure that people fully understand what's going on and how they can miss out. I know that in Windham, the Windham, town of Windham, whether it's the Board of Ed or through the town of Windham, for the town employees, they have the ERISA self-insurance plans. and the deductibles are very, very high, depending on which part of the plan they opt into. So, one of the things that I realized was that some of the lower income people in the school system or even in the town hall were having these huge deductibles and not able to actually be in a situation where they could afford the $6,000 meeting that deductible, and so that was a real problem, and so now we have some money, I think, is being allocated during this session to people who are employees and are in lower income but having to pay into the plans.
Right, we're subsidizing the plans for folks like paraeducators who really couldn't afford their copays and their deductibles, which, it's one way to do things. I'm glad we're providing them with more affordable coverage, but it's depressing that that's where we are as a country.
Well, that's right. I mean, for us to have to subsidize the insurance industry when they're making billions of dollars is really a real problem. And I think that we should be in a situation where we're, that they actually pay their fair share and they do the due diligence that they need to do as they promise that they're going to do. And we have a lot of situations where these programs are going on, and people don't really understand what hit them. I had a situation in my district where somebody was in one of the lower income positions, but had a severe disability and had to go back onto the disability program, and couldn't stay as an employee paying taxes into the system. Instead, had to go back on disability because the deductibles were so high, and they couldn't take advantage of the programs through the Affordable Care Act. So if they had done an Affordable Care, it can't do it with a big employer. I mean, it's got to be under 50 people. So that's the problem. So let's go on to a little bit more about some of the great work that you've done in the Senate. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the environmental legislation that we were able to get through this last session. And I think that that's also very, very important for us to try and make sure that we have good environmental initiatives here, and that we're doing all we can to make sure that we are protecting our microgrid and making sure that we have we're doing more with green buildings.
Absolutely. All right, what in particular were you really excited about this year?
Okay, so I was very excited about the fact that we are expanding eligibility for microgrid and resilience loans, and allowing the state to build more green buildings, and that was something that I thought was a really great idea, and it's something that I think that we're going to be doing. And so I'm very pleased with some of that work and the money that's being put in there through the Green Bank. A lot of that Green Bank work. I mean, I think you were part of the banking. You were working as banking chair, were you not, when we did the Green Bank?
Yes.
So that's.
I think we did most of that to the Energy Committee, but I was involved in that. And the microgrid idea comes out of the big fall storms. About 10 years ago, when we realized just how vulnerable our electric grid is to disruption. And the idea is that if you create microgrids around areas of critical infrastructure in particular, then we're better off. Hospitals and gas stations and town halls and high schools can be better protected if we see a significant disruption to our electric grid. And it allows us to focus on distributed generation. We have smaller power plants frequently, fuel cells or renewables that are able to keep our grid more reliable and help us withstand weather-related or other disruptions of our power grid. And in an uncertain world, one where we're dealing with climate change and all sorts of other issues, it's a way of providing some extra resilience that could leave us much better off in the event of an emergency.
Absolutely. And you know, I was thinking back to that time when we had our first microgrids. I think it was after, was it Storm Sandy? Or was it Irene? I don't.
One of the storms. I can't remember.
I can't remember which storm, but I know former Governor Malloy helped create the microgrid program, and I know that the town of Wyndham, we had one of our firefighters step up and help us get that microgrid program going, and so we have one in Wyndham, but I think having it in other places is going to be essential, especially when you hear all the reports nationally about how a lot of the grids aren't as protected as they ought to be from whatever storms or even interference from some other entities. So it's really really important thing. And so having a good microgrid and being able to have a little more energy independence in each home. If you've got your solar panels and backup batteries now, which you can also get some funding through the Green Bank on, that's another area that I think is really very, very important.
Absolutely.
So moving on a little bit to more education, I can't tell you how happy I am with the fact that the education cost sharing grant will be fully funded in 2025. So that is going to be another thing for our local municipalities to be able to make sure they have that full funding for the ECS formula.
Absolutely, and we've, as we're working to close the achievement gap, and I know you in particular have been working on issues for English language learners. I know that there's a big issue across the state, but particularly in Wyndham, that we're able to provide state funding for lower income school districts to really make sure that they're able to educate the folks across, the young folks in Connecticut. That's really, really critical. So that was a big win this year. We got to make sure that funding continues. But I know you've been such a champion of public education, so this is much deserved. Now, I know some of the unfinished work that I'd like to continue to work with you on, revolves around funding for special education, which right now falls disproportionately, overwhelmingly on local school districts, and it can be really, very hard for them to manage. And so, how do we, provide that support so that kids with special education needs get they get the education and supports that they need is really, really important. I'd like to do more through the Medicaid program. But love to hear your thoughts. I know that this is an issue that you're really passionate about.
Well, I thought that was absolutely brilliant of you to think about Medicaid when it comes to special education, and we still have to do a little bit more of an analysis on that, because if we have a developmental disability that doesn't rise to the point where somebody needs, say, a group home or that sort of situation, but you still have a developmental disability that requires and is special education is provided on, then in that case, we need to make sure that all the schools have the same standards. And one thing is, that we did this last session is we created a work study group on special education to try and standardize special education programs throughout the state and how we make that decision as to who would qualify. So that's a huge step, because to think that we have a special education requirement yet we don't have anything that's standardized is really quite amazing to me, since it's been an issue. We've had special education requirements since the 1970s when Meskel was the governor.
Yeah.
And now I've got to go say another thing that's historic because Meskel created the special education program in our state, and really it has not changed to any great degree in terms of how we fund it. And so it is the thought by former Governor Meskel was to make sure that people just didn't float into the special education program without having any real need. And so he made it very, very difficult to qualify for special education. So I think that this task force is going to be something that will help us, because just think, that was back in the 70s. How much have we learned in terms of science and brain development and all the things that have happened scientifically with learning and analysis since then. So I think we've got to step up and make sure that we're learning and we're applying what we know to special education. And the other aspect of that special education issue is the fact that we had institutional settings for our students back in the day, and then in the 90s, and under the PJ case, another situation that former Governor Rowland created, all of the costs when the children were discharged from the training schools and that sort of thing were passed on to the local communities. So there's another thing that people didn't really understand what was happening. Everybody was for deinstitutionalization, but they did not realize that deinstitutionalization was going to shift the cost from the state to the town. And so here we are now, fast forward, I've done an analysis, financial analysis through the Office of Fiscal Analysis, just to see what the cost shift was and how much the local communities are paying now in total for special education. And it's $1.6 billion.
Wow.
Yeah, $1.6 billion. And when we've underfunded our local schools, half of them have been underfunded, but the ones that were the most underfunded were in the communities with the least amount of resources because they provide the most services, right?
Yeah.
So we have our towns like Windham, Willimantic, Middletown, Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, Waterbury, New London, Norwich, all those places that have payment in lieu of taxes properties that are state-owned, that have all kinds of social service programs, have all kinds of group homes that don't pay tax. All these non-tax-paying properties are in these areas where they have the largest special needs populations.
Right. Well, first of all, for your younger listeners, former Governor Thomas Meskel left office in 1975. But I think it just shows you just how long the current laws that we've been in place on special education have been in effect and have not changed. And, you know, a lot of things have changed since 1975. Most things have changed since 1975, and yet we're still working under, you know, this ancient system of special education funding that has not kept up with the times. You know, we've got a much larger number of kids participating in special ed programs now than we did then, and the costs are far higher, and yet we're still asking, you know, rich towns and poor towns to just figure it out, and you know, that is not working very well.
It's working horribly, and it's really very hard to communicate to the town, the finance groups in the town that do both the education budgets and the town budgets. And like in Windham, for example, we have a board of finance. So to repeat to them, now many do get it, but a lot of people don't, that we have this situation with special ed where if, in fact, we don't have an amount budgeted for the special ed costs in the beginning of the school year, it's not necessarily the fault of anybody in the town who's tried to do a good budget. It's because some new special education students could be moving into your town, and then it's mandated that they actually get the special education care, which can cost a great deal of money. Right now, it's 4.5 times the per pupil cost, which means that in my town, it means about $130,000 that has to be spent by the town before there's any supplement by the state, and the state only supplements to, they say they're supplementing to around 80%, but I looked at all the data from this last year, and they weren't supplementing up to 80%. They supplemented 77%, 72% in some towns. Every town was a little bit different, but it was in the 70s, not 80%. So up to that 80%, and then the town is responsible for the balance. Now, if you have a special needs student that goes into an institutional setting because it has to go for whatever reason, that cost falls on the town.
Yeah, and the costs can be, you know, sometimes special ed costs are pretty minor, but for a student who needs an out-of-state placement, you know, the cost can be millions of dollars a year. That's a lot of money for a small district. That's
for sure. And it's a lot of money for a district that's been underfunded for years. It doesn't have a tax base because they look at Hartford, New Haven, look at all the places that do the service. I call them, some people call them distressed municipalities. I call them service municipalities because they serve the region. They serve the state. We serve our region. We serve all the places all around us don't have homeless shelters. All the places around us don't have nonprofit organizations or group homes to speak of. So we provide those services, and the places around us don't have a hospital or a university or a tech school or a community college or a fire school or an airport. We have all those things, and we have just a little bit less than 25,000 people, and we are supplementing that. And then they wonder why the mill rate's high. Really?
Yeah.
Really? With no subsidies from the state, and when we're doing state work.
Unbelievable.
It is.
Well, we have our work to do, and I think, until we get there, until we tackle all the costs of education, I don't think we could say, hey, we are fully funding education. I know we're funding one specific part of education, but not even the biggest part. If we're going to be serious about equity and closing the achievement gap, we have to tackle special education and some of the other big ticket inequities in our system.
Absolutely, that is so true. So we have to really understand what we're doing. It's very easy to understand, how to make sure that you get some kind of tax credit or tax break, but it's not as easy to understand the financing mechanisms that go into our schools. Beyond the fact that people have to pay some percentage of their property tax toward the school, some percentage of their property tax towards town government. These are the things that people understand. But when you get into the cost-sharing grant or special education and reimbursement systems, these are things that we have to continue to make sure people in the towns that we serve understand exactly what's going on so that they can work with us to make the changes that we have to make to have good equity in our systems. So that's exactly right. So I just wanted to, we just have a few more minutes left, and I just wondered some of the things that I've hit on, but how about some of the things you've hit on, would like to hit on maybe?
Well, so one of the things we did this year, again, I was just appointed chair of the Human Services Committee in January, and this is a real opportunity to do an awful lot. One of the things that we partly did this year, but have a lot more work to do, is to bring up our Medicaid reimbursement rates. Medicaid, which provides health care for seniors and the low-income community, and people with disabilities, is still spending the same rates that it spent in 2007. In fact, it's paying just a little over 50% of what Medicare spent in 2007. And if you go anywhere else and you try to pay 2007 prices, people will laugh at you. So we really do need to bring up our reimbursement rates to make sure that program is successful. The other thing I'd like to do is to make sure that we're able to have a seamless transition from people with Medicaid to private health insurance, and that's by expanding a program called Covered Connecticut that's been really successful at helping low-wage working adults afford quality health insurance. But we can expand it and to support a lot more people well into the middle class. I don't believe, and I know you believe, that people, in our state who are working should have quality health insurance. And we can make that a reality. We could really take that burden off of folks. And the Covered Connecticut program, which Governor Lamont helped spearhead a couple of years ago, I think is a really good avenue towards addressing that for low-income and middle-income families out there. And then there's a lot more stuff that I'd like to tackle, including prescription drug prices. So we'll see. I'd love to work with you in the coming session. I think we have a lot of stuff underway. You're a real champion legislator at getting all sorts of nitty-gritty policies enacted into law, and it's been a pleasure to watch you work. And I think we can get a lot done this coming year.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words, and I feel the same way about you. I think that you've done amazing work, and it's just been a real honor to be able to work with you on the things that you've done, and I'm really, really, really pleased to have you and Jillian as co-chairs of Human Services, because you understand and you want to make sure that the people in the Connecticut are able to, you know, participate in the economy, make sure the kids are treated well, make sure everybody has access to the health care that is necessary, and of course, making sure the Medicaid program pays what it's supposed to pay will be something that is going to be something I guess we're analyzing right now as part of the Medical Assistance Policy Oversight Council. We did have a discussion about that with one of the people who works there to work on this particular issue. So we're working at that, and also the monopolization of our hospitals. I mean, that of course has had a huge impact on how we pay for, say, our maternity wards and that sort of thing. Might be another way to, you know, take a look at our Medicaid payments, because about 50% of the people who have a child in their state are Medicaid eligible. And of course, we can't say that without reminding people about baby bonds. But they're going to have the baby bonds program, and so from now on, children born on Medicaid will have some amount of money to be able to move forward and have something for post-secondary education.
Absolutely. It could be transformative. So a lot of work to do. Very excited to take part in it with you, Susan, and it's been a real pleasure to talk to you today.
It's been great. Thank you so much, Senator Lesser, for being on the show. I really appreciate all your work, and I look forward to next session working with you on these issues. Thank you so much, and talk soon. Go ahead.
And please give my regards to your co-host.
I will, absolutely. We will all get together soon, I'm sure.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks so much. Take care, Senator.